You dare to oppose me, a newcomer? Don't joke around. The hysterical female manager continued her tirade, her anger escalating. Being new, I had always been yelled at by this female manager simply for that reason. I had endured it, thinking I wasn't meeting expectations, but on this matter, I was unwilling to back down. What's with that look? You think you can challenge me and get away with it? I firmly believe that, in this case, both the female manager and McLaren were wrong. However, I also understood that as things stood, neither of them would change their minds. There are plenty of more where you came from. I was angered by these words from the female manager. Anyway, I lacked the confidence to continue under this female manager. Understood, then I'll resign. I won't come in from tomorrow. I retorted to the ranting female manager. I just couldn't forgive this female manager and McLaren. At that moment, I vowed to get my revenge on these two. My name is Ileana, a fresh graduate and new employee. Since I was young, I've loved dogs and cats. I always wanted a job involving dogs and cats. The company I joined sells and wholesales pet supplies and also offers pet sitting services. I was assigned to the pet sitting department. We care for pets when their owners are away and arrange their living environments if requested. It's a convenient service for pet owners, often leading to repeat customers. Despite being a newbie with little experience, I had visited customers several times. I was happy to please the customers and interact with the dogs and cats I love. Being an animal lover, this job felt like a dream come true, my calling since childhood. But I had a problem. It was my boss, the female manager, and my colleague and senior, McLaren. The female manager was domineering and hysterical, often harassing newcomers like me when stressed. She was also easily influenced by power. McLaren, a colleague and senior, was the son of an MD. Being an executive's son, no one dared to speak against him. Taking advantage of this, McLaren was lazy and never worked. The female manager, ever eager to please him, neglected her duties. McLaren, working hard I see. Ileana, come here. Called by the female manager, I was reprimanded for my hair color being too bright. McLaren, hardly working at all, is being praised? I struggled to understand what the female manager was saying. McLaren gets praised for doing nothing, while I'm criticized for my hair color. Such unfairness. The disparity in how McLaren and I were treated filled me with frustration. Then the female manager added insult to injury. Ileana is no good at anything. What can you actually do? She sighed as she said this. As a newcomer, there were certainly things I couldn't yet handle, but I couldn't recall doing anything to deserve her anger. Eventually feeling down, I boldly asked the female manager, "What am I doing wrong?" She glared at me, closing in. She persistently said that being new doesn't mean getting off easy. Once the female manager entered this mode, she would lecture me for a long time. I've never seen someone as slow to progress as you. Her words deeply upset me. I didn't think I was excelling at work, but I hadn't imagined being this bad. I knew I had to try even harder. But my efforts seemed futile, as I faced harassment from the female manager daily. My colleagues would say not to worry about it, but I couldn't stop thinking about how to avoid the female manager's anger. Then one day, I was scheduled to visit a client with McLaren. The thought of partnering with McLaren filled me with dread. We headed to the client's house in the company car. Upon arrival, we started working right away. Within 5 minutes, McLaren called me over. "Hey, finish up the rest." Saying this, McLaren left in the company car, heading somewhere unknown. Stunned, I was speechless. The client wasn't home, and I couldn't leave, so I followed McLaren's instructions and worked alone. Eventually, the client returned. Our job was done, but I couldn't leave without McLaren. Reluctantly, I called McLaren's mobile phone. He answered after several rings, loud noise audible on his end. "I'm in the middle of something good here. Just wait a bit longer," he said, hanging up abruptly. It seemed McLaren was at a casino. He had dumped the work on me and gone off to have fun. Such behavior can't possibly be allowed, I thought, as anger welled up inside me. Desperately trying to contain my feelings, I asked the client if I could stay a little longer. Of course I couldn't tell them that McLaren was at a casino. McLaren returned 2 hours later. On the way back to the office, I confronted him. Then McLaren made a shocking statement. "Work is such a hassle. You're the newcomer. You should handle it." Hearing this, I was infuriated. If it's such a hassle, why don't you just quit? To my challenge, McLaren, reclining in the passenger seat, raised his voice. "I'll be reporting today's incident to the manager." Unfazed by my words, McLaren was indifferent, suggesting I do as I please. His arrogant attitude persisted until we returned to the office, leaving me with nothing but unresolved anger. Upon our return, the female manager, noticing our late arrival, immediately started a hysterical rant. "Manager, actually today..." As I tried to explain, McLaren unexpectedly interrupted. "It got late because this one was so slow. I had to cover for her." Incredibly, McLaren blamed me for our late return. Stunned and speechless, I was then berated by the female manager. "Learn to do your job properly. Why are you troubling your senior?" Regaining my composure, I confronted the female manager. "Wait a minute." I desperately tried to explain to the female manager, who was sympathizing with McLaren. McLaren, having slipped away to a casino during work, obviously hadn't worked at the client's place we had just visited. Because he was caught up in the casino, he was 2 hours late to pick me up. I honestly told the female manager everything as it happened. However, her response was unbelievable. "Stop lying. What do you hope to achieve by framing your senior, McLaren?" Her words left me frozen. I realized then that arguing with her was pointless. The female manager continued to berate me. I loved my job, wanted to keep doing it, and had worked hard. Why did I have to endure such treatment? Why do you think what I say is a lie, and McLaren is right? My question only fueled the female manager's anger. No matter how angry she became, I couldn't accept it. It was unbearable being accused of lying when I was telling the truth. "How dare you, a newcomer, oppose me? Don't be ridiculous." The hysterical female manager had another outburst of anger. Being new, I had always been yelled at by this female manager. I had put up with it, thinking I wasn't meeting expectations, but I was determined not to back down on this issue. "What's with that look? You think you can defy me and get away with it?" I was convinced that in this case, both the female manager and McLaren were wrong, but I also knew that neither of them would change their minds as things stood. "There are plenty of more where you came from." These words from the female manager infuriated me. I knew I couldn't continue working under her. "Understood. Then I'll resign. I won't be coming in from tomorrow," I declared to the ranting female manager. I couldn't forgive the female manager and McLaren. It was the moment I vowed revenge on them. The next day, having quit, I spent the day at home, not thinking about anything. Then it dawned on me that I had been too self-absorbed. What about the clients I had been serving? Thankfully, I had a fair number of clients who requested my services specifically. Leaving without saying anything felt unfair to them. I decided to inform them of my resignation and thank them for their kindness. I visited each client, explaining my resignation and expressing my gratitude. Each client pleaded with me not to leave, saying they wouldn't request services if I was gone. They truly needed me. Overwhelmed with happiness, I broke down in tears in front of them. Returning home, as the day turned to evening, the mistreatment from the female manager and McLaren resurfaced in my mind, fueling my anger. Despite vowing revenge, I couldn't think of how to carry it out. As I pondered my next steps, the doorbell rang. Wondering who it could be, I peered through the peephole and was surprised. Standing there trembling were the female manager and the CEO. Realizing what was happening, I understood everything. It seemed the last thing I wanted to be known had come out. "Ileana, I've heard about it." The CEO calling me Ileana was none other than my father. The pet-sitting company I worked for was run by him, but I didn't want everyone to know I was the CEO's daughter. I loved my job and wanted to be recognized on my own merit. Also, I disliked the idea of being treated differently because I was the CEO's daughter. The one thing that saved me was having a common last name. No one realized I was the CEO's daughter because of it. But having resigned, it didn't matter anymore who knew.
The clients you visited today complained to the company after you left,
the CEO explained. He described the events leading up to his visit. Clients I greeted during the day had called the company furious. They wanted to know why I was let go and said they wouldn't request services without me. The client complaints reached the CEO's ears, unable to be contained by the female manager alone. The CEO, upon learning the situation, demanded an explanation from the female manager. "I'm truly sorry." The female manager, now unusually humble, apologized to me, but I knew the truth. She was apologizing because I was the CEO's daughter. Ignoring her, I reported in detail to the CEO about everything the female manager had done. "I will never forgive this. She's just working for her own protection, isn't she?" Many employees had been driven to tears and resignation by the female manager's hysteria. Some, like me, loved their jobs and wanted to continue. It was unjust that people who prioritized themselves or leisure over work survived. The CEO asked me to return to the company, so I started going in from the next day. Arriving at work, my colleagues rushed over. They were concerned about me and offered their support. They too were displeased with the female manager and McLaren. Looking around, neither the female manager nor McLaren were in sight. I heard the female manager had been ordered to stay at home until her punishment was decided, and McLaren was supposedly visiting a client. As I was discussing this with my colleagues, the CEO arrived. Worried if I had come to work, he listened as I reported McLaren's misdeeds. My colleagues also began voicing their complaints about McLaren.
"So it is. I need to verify this."
The CEO, having silently listened to the complaints, instructed his secretary to bring the car around. He took me to the client's house where McLaren was supposed to be. Arriving there and looking around, the company car was nowhere to be seen. The CEO then directed the driver to head to a nearby casino. At the casino, we quickly found the company car parked. Inside, we easily located McLaren. "I can't believe he's actually here," I muttered in disbelief. Entering the casino with the CEO, his face was filled with anger. Understandably so. Even as the MD's son, McLaren shouldn't be using a company car for personal enjoyment at a casino.
"What are you doing?"
McLaren, engrossed in the casino, hadn't noticed our approach. He seemed particularly distracted, perhaps due to a winning streak at a slot machine. Tapped on the shoulder by the CEO, McLaren turned around cheerfully, not immediately grasping the situation, and stared at the CEO, his mouth agape.
Why?"
The CEO was furiously angry. I had never seen him so intimidating.
"Don't make me say it again. What are you doing here?"
Startled by the CEO's shout, McLaren stood up from his chair.
Well, I'm just on break."
Pressured by the CEO's intensity, McLaren responded nervously. Even in this situation, I was amazed at how he could still lie so unconvincingly.
"Stop lying."
The CEO's shout, as loud as the casino's noise, made McLaren tremble.
"Pushing your work onto colleagues while you play around. What a privileged position you have."
Ordered outside by the CEO, McLaren followed us out, looking pitiful.
"Drop this notion that being the son of a company executive will get you off the hook. There will be an emergency board meeting tomorrow. Make sure you're there."
Outside the casino, the CEO yelled at McLaren and told me to attend the meeting too. McLaren, now dejected, hung his head. I decided that the time to exact revenge on McLaren and the female manager would be at that moment. The next day, the emergency board meeting called by the CEO was about to start. As I headed to the meeting room, the executives were already gathering. Looking around, I spotted the female manager and McLaren. McLaren, who seemed so defeated yesterday, now had a nonchalant expression. "Don't worry, your father will protect you," as the female manager had assured him. I was appalled by their twisted characters when the CEO arrived, and the meeting began. At the start, the CEO explained the purpose of the urgent gathering. Immediately, the MD, McLaren's father, spoke up.
Is this really a matter for an emergency board meeting?
And he showed a stance of defending him. He seemed intent on defending his son. Clearly, he doted on his son. Ignoring the MD's comment, the CEO addressed the gathered executives.
I believe this is a major loss for the company. But what do you all think?
The executives all nodded in agreement with the CEO's words. That would be expected. Anyone with common sense wouldn't approve of McLaren's neglect of work for the casino. After explaining the situation, the CEO asked the female manager to explain her behavior.
I didn't know she was the CEO's daughter.
The female manager's excuse sounded like a plea to the executives, and the CEO's anger exploded.
What does it matter if she's the CEO's daughter or the MD's son?
The CEO's voice echoed through the meeting room.
You don't seem fit to be a leader.
As the CEO said this, the MD opened his mouth as if to defend the female manager. Then, the CEO revealed a shocking truth. The MD and the female manager were having an affair. There had been rumors about the two acting strangely, and upon investigation, it turned out to be true. I couldn't hide my surprise at this revelation.
I suspected it, but to think it was true. I don't intend to meddle in personal affairs, but appropriate behavior is required at work.
Upon hearing the CEO's words, the MD, who had been defending his son and the female manager, turned pale and fell silent. The female manager was single, but the MD was married. This scandal could have serious repercussions, not just at work, but at home. The CEO, who had effectively silenced the MD, then demanded an explanation from McLaren. Realizing he could no longer rely on his father, McLaren offered a childish excuse, claiming that being caught was just a coincidence and not his usual behavior. I couldn't stay silent at his continued denial. Even if it was a coincidence, do you think that makes it acceptable? McLaren glared at me. Even the female manager next to him looked at me with hostility, as if blaming me for their predicament. I decided to play my final card, asking the executives to watch a particular video. It was footage from a pet camera. A pet camera is a small camera installed inside a home to allow pet owners to monitor their pets in real time through their mobile phones while away. After resigning, a client I visited and confided in about my resignation had given me the camera footage, thinking it might be helpful. Projected on the screen was McLaren, ignoring the pet and absorbed in his mobile phone. Confronted with undeniable evidence, McLaren still looked around desperately seeking an excuse. Frozen next to him was the female manager. Manager, even after seeing this, do you still think McLaren is doing a good job? McLaren, is this also a coincidence? I had been troubled enough by these two. To clear my conscience, I confronted them with all the feelings I had harbored. Are you going to say I'm lying again? If you hate your job so much, resign right now. Without a word of rebuttal, both hung their heads. The company isn't here for you. Why should people who genuinely love their work have to leave because of your unreasonable behavior? The two who had been glaring at me now had red faces and downturned mouths. The executives watched them with cold expressions. I hadn't intended to rely on my father's position as CEO, but I was grateful that he had convened this executive meeting, allowing me to confront the female manager and McLaren with my pent-up feelings. Before the meeting started, I had asked the CEO to install a small camera in a spot overlooking the meeting room. Watching the two, who had once been so arrogant, now diminished, must have been a relief for my colleagues who had also suffered under them. The female manager and McLaren were being interrogated by the CEO and other executives about how they intended to take responsibility. They looked defeated, a stark contrast to their former selves.
Do you have anything to say to those you have heard so far?
Urged by the CEO, the female manager and McLaren, appearing resigned, uttered apologies, saying they were sorry. It was the moment when the dissatisfaction I had harbored for so long was finally cleared. Several days after the board meeting, before any formal punishment from the company, McLaren resigned. From what I heard from colleagues, he spends his days in the casino without even looking for another job. The female manager was demoted and now works under employees less experienced than herself. One day, I passed by the former female manager in the office. She avoided eye contact while greeting me, biting her lip. Her pride seemed as high as ever, but she had only herself to blame. I hoped she would experience the same unpleasant feelings she had inflicted on others, now being scolded by a junior executive who had become her boss. A few years later, I was called by the CEO, who asked me,
"Why do you want to hide the fact that you are the CEO's daughter?"
I love my job and wanted to be valued for my individual contributions, not seen differently because of my relationship. I shared my honest feelings with the CEO.
"Isn't that enough? You're cherished by so much of the clients. That's something to be thankful for."
Clients who had always requested me as their pet sitter introduced me to a breeder acquaintance, leading to word-of-mouth recommendations that I could be trusted with their pets. As a result, my clientele grew, and I was busy every day. Recognizing my efforts to always please the clients, I was soon promoted to manager. It was an extraordinary promotion that became the talk of the company, but no one suspected it was because I was the CEO's daughter, as I heard from my colleagues. Being acknowledged as an individual was the most gratifying thing for me. Feeling happy and fulfilled being valued for the work I genuinely love, I am determined to continue striving for rewarding days ahead.